In this video, we'll look at several different creative transition techniques you can make in Reaper, like this one, and this one, and this one. Let's check it out. The best, most effective transitions actually happen in the camera, and I'm going to recommend a course on from Skillshare, sponsor of this video, from Maddie Brown, Filming Scene Transitions, Creative Techniques on a Budget. He does all this awesome transition stuff inside the camera, whip pans, whooshes, fading into black, seamless reveal. Highly recommend this. It's one of my favorite courses that I've taken on Skillshare so far. Skillshare is an online learning community for creators with more than 25,000 classes in music production, video production, art and design, and more. I love that there are no ads or distractions on the site. There's no hostile comment section underneath each video, and the annual subscription is less than $10 a month. So the first 500 people to use the link in the description below will get 2 free months of a premium membership. Thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Let's start off with just looking at the 2 pieces of footage that we're going to transition between. So make this full screen and play it. They're similar scenes. I think they're from different days. The actual footage doesn't really matter. We just need 2 pieces of footage to go in between with a transition file. So I've got this arranged in sort of a different way than I normally work, but I think it's a little bit easier. And for something that's coming up later on, it's the only way that it will work. So just keep that in mind. For this transition and many of the other ones, you can put both pieces of footage on the same track. I think it's a little easier to follow for you guys that are new to video editing in Reaper, that footage A transitions into footage B and they're on separate tracks. I think it's pretty simple. Here is the transition file, and this is a lens flare sort of transition. This is you can easily make these files, and you can find many of them online. So this one here, I believe I downloaded. Let's check in here. I think it's one of these ones. Yeah, I think it's white.mp4. So this is what it looks like normally. And it's just white light with a black background. And for most of these effects, that's what you want. You want some sort of pure black background, and then you add some out of focus bits of color or light, and then you can use that as a transition file. So this, I'll play that as it is. So then I've applied the lighten screen overlay preset. There will be a link in the description, or I'll put the code or something. A lot of these effects will rely on this little bit of code here to make it work. Essentially, all it does is take the black part, make that transparent, and it's going to add any color or light information to the underlying footage. So here's the footage. And as you can hear, I've added in a little bit of a sound effect. It's a reversed metal scrape. Now let's dig out that original sound. I will unreverse it and drag it out completely. I don't remember where I got this one from, but it's just like a gross metal scrape sound. But reversed, sort of a magical sound. Pretty cool. So anyways, a lot of these are set up in the very same way. Footage A ends, you get to the end point, you find footage B, you find its start point, and then you put some transition file in the middle. I like about 15 frames. I work in 30 frames per second, so that works for me. This one right now is 20 frames, but you just want a little bit of time. We can also modify this by adding in a second instance of the video processor. We can put on something like item fades effect video preset. And so by doing a little bit of a fade in and out here, the footage now looks like this. Fades in and out, and it looks a little bit better. This sort of effect is something that you can make on your own. This footage here is one that I made. I set up my camera, got the room really dark, and I was doing things like putting a flashlight through my hand, going through different gemstones and colored paper and reflecting it off of things so that it flares um, on the camera lens, all those sorts of things. It's really simple, pretty fun to make those. I got the kids involved a little bit, and yeah, we had a good time. So here's this other transition effect. So this one, actually, I didn't have the effects active at the time, so let's put on that lighten screen overlay, and so it looks like this. But we could also change that so it fades in a little bit nicer with that item fades effect video. You can also adjust the color of this. So we could change the contrast. You can completely change the tint of it and all that kind of stuff. Actually, what I might do is put on a different, the video controls one, and change the opacity so it's not so bright overall. So that's number one. That's the lens flare style of transitions. You'll see those a lot. The next one is a color flash transition. This is similar to something I showed in the previous video about doing these transitions. Instead of using a pure white background or transition effect, I'm using a different color here. I'm using the solid color overlay preset that I made, and then item fades effect video as well. So here's what this transition looks like. And I think something like that is helped by adding in a little whoosh or swish or whip sort of sound. That's a really simple one. Really, you just put in an empty MIDI item, some sort of container that can hold an effects. You insert your effects, so utility video processor. You put in the color, solid color. You set the opacity to something like that. And yeah, so I'm gonna mute this original one, and it just flashes a certain color for a moment, and you can further tweak that by adding in fades in and out. I'm using shortcuts, but you can just drag the corners to add in a fade. The fades won't be visible until you put in another video processor with the item fades effect video. So, so just going through this frame by frame, right here in the middle, it's the full opacity that we've set here in the solid color settings. So if I have that at 100%, you'll see it's solid green, but during this fade area, you get less opacity. So we're just kind of setting the maximum opacity in there and then using the fades as a modification of that. That's a pretty simple one. I think it's most effective used just as a white flash. You'll see that used a lot in my videos. But yeah, you can do the same thing with color very easily. And you can generate the color through the video processor like I have, or import any footage of really any color that you want to overlay in there. You could have footage of grass, of water, something like that. Just flash it for a few frames and then you're into the next scene. The next one is a Pixelate transition. I'll show you what this looks like. Let's do that one more time. And I think that turned out really well. All I'm doing here is adding in a empty MIDI item on this track at the transition point. The length of it is 15 frames. The actual code comes from one of the built-in presets in the effects category, looking for a Pixelate image. And the default preset is not going to be, not going to really look right. It just does a very small area. I'll actually reset this so you can see. So it's hard to tell, but it's just like this little square right here. That's not going to work for us. So the X position goes to 0, the Y position goes to 0, which is the top left corner. The width will be 100%, and the height will be 100%. So now the entire screen is pixelated, but these pixels are too small to really look right. And so bringing it up to like, at 1, it's very, very blocky, obviously, but somewhere around 0.7 or 0.8 looks pretty good to me, or it looks bad in a good way. You know what I mean. And I find that this is really helped by adding in some sort of noise sample. I don't even know where I got this. The sound effect really helps sell this transition. I don't know, maybe it's a bit too much of a horror movie vibe, but I think it works pretty well. The next transition is a blur. And so again, this is using just a built-in preset that comes with Reaper. Just call up the effects blur Gaussian blur, and you're going to set this with the sigma control, the amount of blur. And so I've got my cursor right here in the middle of this transition. So see, that's pretty blurred, and that's at 18. I think the default setting is 1, and it's just not really doing it for me. I want it to be quite strongly blurred. And the other stuff I didn't really touch. All right, so this one, it takes quite a bit of CPU to run it, so that's why this preview isn't clear. But that's pretty good, actually. The camera blurs and it goes into the next scene, but, you know, or it unblurs. This one I really like. This is the RGB Glitch. And so here's how this looks. Play it again. So again, this is a built-in video processor preset. You're just looking in the effects category, RGB decompose. And then you just kind of randomly set some of these settings. So the red channel X offset is horizontal, just the red information. And red Y is the up and down offset. And so you set the red, green, and blue to just kind of random colors. Random settings. And I've actually split this up into different ones, so it sort of flickers. And each of these has slightly different settings for the preset settings, code, whatever you want to call it, preset code. But if it was all the same, it still looks pretty good, actually. So I'll just make this. And even that is kind of interesting. And again, if you have some sort of a sound effect as that transition's happening, it can look really cool. But I think doing something like this, where you kind of like taking 1 frame away, 2 frames, something like that. Sort of like a stuttery jump. It works well with that noise. Let's copy this over and make that go to the same length. And that works pretty well. All right, this next one I just call static. We're overlaying some stock footage of static noise. And it's just like a couple frames. What is this? This is 6 frames of just static. And there's a couple different ways you can manipulate this. First of all, it came in at 4:3, so it's not going to work right. So I just zoomed it in a little bit. And I also lowered the opacity just about a quarter. You can kind of just barely see the footage underneath. You can set this much lower, and you can still see the footage. It's your choice what you want to do with it. And then you can also put on the lighten screen overlay, and that's going to have a different effect dependent on the opacity you choose, and the stock footage that you're using here. So with the lighten screen overlay and the opacity at 1, it looks like this. It's so brief that it almost doesn't even matter what settings you use. So I'll just stretch it out a little bit. Which looks wrong because the sound isn't following, but I think you get the idea. You get so many different effects you can get, basically doing the exact same thing with different stock. So whether you're using the light leaks or lens flares or the static or generating some color or so many different effects. And once you try a few of these, you're quickly going to find your favorite styles. And they're really not that difficult. They're a little time consuming to add in to your project. But remember, not every edit needs a transition. So it can be really annoying to use these sorts of effects, especially when there's a sound effect along with it every single time. But use it sparingly, and it can improve the quality of your video. Use it too much, and it makes it worse again. All right, so back to Reaper. Let's look at this last one, and it's a mask transition, where we're using, again, a third file, but we're using it in a certain way. We're using some footage that combines white and black, or any shade between. As it transitions between white and black, it's going to pass through the other video. What I have here is stuff that's moving, and it's going to reveal the second layer of footage. So here's how I have it set up. I've got footage A and footage B, and they're completely overlapping. Because of the way that Reaper works and most other video editors, whatever is on the top is going to be visible. When footage A is there, you can't see footage B. So just this transition file on its own looks like this. I actually got this footage from Shutterstock. They have a free video editor toolkit. They're not sponsored. I'm not going to talk any more about them, but I got this and several other files like this from them, and it's free. So, worth checking out if you need these things. So that's the footage. I got another example here. Looks like this. On the mask filter track, I have to have a second item, or I need another video item above that mask, because I'm using this preset from www.maze, one of the members of the Reaper forum. He made this preset, so there's going to be a link in the description to get this preset. But it's set up in a certain way. I mentioned the order of the tracks making a difference. This is actually set up in the opposite way that I like to set up my projects. So the default settings here are going to be different with the track offsets. By default, it's going to be 1, 2, 3. To get this to work the way that I want it to work, it needs to be 2, 3, and 1. So the top track is the mask, so we want that on track 1. Then we've got the background, that's the first file, and then the second file is going to be the foreground. This will do all the rest for us. So yeah, this is what it looks like now. A little bit choppy sometimes. But as you can see, as this thing goes around, what was white in the file originally is our foreground file, or footage B, and anything that was black is passing through the footage A file. This is the only way that I've been able to make this work. I haven't been able to have this file live on top of the actual mask file. It's got to be on the track above. I don't know why, and I don't have time to ask, unfortunately. So there's the first one, and here's the second transition file, kind of like a bullseye thing. There's a lot more in that bundle of stock footage. You can make your own little animation things. Anything with white and black, 100% white, 100% black works really well. And if you arrange your tracks like this with footage A, footage B, and then the mask on the track above, and then an empty file to hold that video processor, it works really well. One additional thing is that mask filter track needs to have the apply effects only when the track has video items. This preset right here, you need that one. So there you go, 7 transition effects that you can do pretty easily in Reaper. There will be links to everything that I mentioned in the description box below and in the blog post. If you missed previous tutorials on video production in Reaper, there's a playlist. I highly recommend doing that. going through those videos before you take on these things, because this is more advanced stuff for sure. So thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter, support the Reaper blog through Patreon, and visit reaperblog.net for a lot more tutorials.